approach, though challenging and difficult, is one of the most rewarding and honorable ways to deal with adversaries. Patience and steadfastness are not signs of weakness or passivity, but rather manifestations of strength and active resilience. Allah says in the Quran, "And we will surely test you with something of fear and hunger, and a loss of wealth and lives and fruits. But give good tidings to the patient, who when disaster strikes them say, Indeed we belong to Allah, and indeed to Him we will return."
So I just came on to say hello. Hello, Moto.
Mercy, and it is those who are rightly guided. This divine promise emphasizes the significance of patience as it leads to blessings and guidance from Allah. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, also highlighted the virtue of patience, saying, "How wonderful is the case of a believer. There is good for him in everything, and this applies only to a believer. If prosperity attends him, he expresses gratitude to Allah, and that is good for him. And if adversity befalls him, he endures it patiently, and that is better for him." This hadith underscores that a believer finds goodness in every situation, whether in times of ease or hardship, by expressing gratitude or enduring patiently. By maintaining patience and steadfastness, we convey to our enemies that we are unfazed by their plots and schemes, demonstrating our unwavering trust in Allah's plan and wisdom. This approach mirrors the exemplary conduct of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, who exhibited unparalleled patience and perseverance in the face of severe trials. He endured the persecution and boycott by the Quraysh in Makkah, faced battles and betrayals from hypocrites and Jews in Medina, and suffered personal losses, including the deaths of his beloved wife Khadija and his uncle Abu Talib. Despite these hardships, he remained patient and steadfast, ultimately receiving victory and honor from Allah. Moreover, by embodying patience and steadfastness, we earn Allah's reward and mercy, as He loves those who exhibit these qualities. The Quran assures us, "Indeed, Allah is with the patient." This divine companionship is a powerful source of strength and reassurance, affirming that patience is not just a passive endurance, but an active engagement with faith and resilience. Through patience and steadfastness, we can overcome our enemies not by physical confrontation, but by rising above their provocations and placing our trust in the justice and mercy of Allah. Lesson 6. Seek knowledge and wisdom to deal with your enemies, and do not be ignorant. The sixth way to destroy your enemies without fighting them is to seek knowledge and wisdom to deal with them, and do not be ignorant or foolish. This may seem like a subtle and indirect way of dealing with our enemies, but it's actually one of the most effective and strategic ways of dealing with them. Seeking knowledge and wisdom is not a waste or a luxury, but rather a necessity and a duty. Seeking knowledge and wisdom is not a weakness or a compromise, but rather a strength and an advantage. Allah says in the Quran, "And say, My Lord, increase me in knowledge." The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said, "Seeking knowledge is an obligation upon every Muslim." By seeking knowledge and wisdom, we equip ourselves with the tools and skills to deal with our enemies in the best possible manner. We also follow the example of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, who was the most knowledgeable and wise of people, even though he was unlettered and had no formal education. He learned from Allah through the revelation of the Quran and the inspiration of the angel Jibreel. He learned from his companions and his enemies through observation and experience. He learned from the previous prophets and nations through the stories and the lessons in the Quran. He learned from everything and everyone around him, and he taught his followers with knowledge and wisdom. By seeking knowledge and wisdom, we also gain the respect and the admiration of our enemies, who may recognize the truth and the excellence of Islam. We also hope that Allah will increase us in knowledge and wisdom and grant us his guidance and understanding. Lesson 7. Invite your enemies to Islam and do not despair of their guidance. The seventh and final way to destroy your enemies without fighting them is to invite them to Islam and do not despair of their guidance. This may seem like the most impossible and unrealistic way of dealing with our enemies, but is actually one of the most noble and rewarding ways of dealing with them. Inviting them to Islam is not a betrayal or a humiliation, but rather a favor and honor. Inviting them to Islam is not a harm or a loss, but rather a benefit and a gain. Allah says in the Quran, "Invite to the way of your Lord with wisdom and good instruction, and argue with them in a way that is best. Indeed, your Lord is most knowing of who has strayed from his way, and is most knowing of who is rightly guided." The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said, "Convey from me even if it is one verse." Sahih al-Bukhari 3461. By inviting our enemies to Islam, we show them the true message and the beauty of Islam, which is a religion of peace, mercy, and justice. We also follow the example of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, who was the most inviting and the most merciful of people, even to his worst enemies. He invited the idolaters of Makkah to worship Allah alone and to abandon their false gods. He invited the Jews and the Christians to follow the final revelation and the final prophet. He invited the kings and the rulers of the world to embrace Islam and submit to Allah. He invited everyone he met to Islam, and he never gave up on anyone's guidance. By inviting our enemies to Islam, we also fulfill our duty and our responsibility as Muslims who are witnesses to mankind and bearers of the truth. We also hope that Allah will guide our enemies to Islam, or at least to peace and justice, so that they will become our friends and allies in this world and the next. We also hope that Allah will reward us for our efforts and our sincerity, and grant us his pleasure in his paradise. We have reached the end of this video, but not the end of our journey together. Today, we've